Welcome to another Salt Bake Q&A. Today, we're spending time with comedian Tamer Kattan, a multi-award winning international comedian with a very deep understanding of the human condition. Tamer is a talented writer and producer with TV and commercial credits in the United States and the United Kingdom. He's a regular at the Comedy Store, Improv and Laugh Factory in LA.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tamer Kattan!
I love coming down to Hermosa Beach. I live in Hollywood, and you guys have all the stuff that we don't have in Hollywood. Happiness and joy. We don't have that in Hollywood anymore. It's run out. I'm an Arabic person, but no one believes me because I'm happy.
It's not too heavy for Monday.
Nah, man, I'm an open book.
Okay, great. What was your defining moment as a comedian?
We're gonna go heavy real quick. We're gonna go heavy quick. Now, let me just specify. Do you mean defining moment as a comedian, or defining moment that made me become one?
Yes.
Okay, the latter.
No, both.
Okay, so defining moment. I'll tell you the real life version, and then I'll tell you the joke that I did on stage that was inspired by the moment I knew I was a comedian. Right? I'll tell you the joke first, and then I'll tell you the real story, because the real story is kind of heavy. So my joke was that I knew I was a comedian the first time I tried to tell a joke. And it was when my dad was in the living room watching Murder, She Wrote, and I jumped in front of the TV set and I said, knock, knock, and then he hit me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that came out of the fact that I realized that a lot of comics learn to be funny out of pain. It's an act of defiance to be funny when things want to make you cry. It's the most punk rock thing in the world to say, yeah, you're not going to take away my spirit. You're not going to take away my soul. And, my dad was a victim of child abuse, and then he ended up being a child abuser. It's like he was bitten by a vampire, and then he bit me, but thankfully I found therapy, so I'm not that way. You know what I mean? And,
Sure.
But the moment for me that was really big, my dad was a boxer, and one morning he accidentally hit me in the face, and I got a little bit of a black eye, and I was embarrassed. He went to school. I was a latchkey kid, he went to work, sorry. And I was a latchkey kid on my way to school, and I was embarrassed that I had a black eye. So I went into the bathroom and I found my mom's makeup, and I put foundation on my eye to hide the black eye. And obviously I wasn't good at it. And I got to school and these kids are like, that kid's wearing makeup. What a homo. And then they punched me in the other eye.
Oh, no.
And I went home with 2 black eyes that day. And I had a black eye from home and a black eye from school. And I remembered the time I loved the most was the walk in between those 2 places, and then I realized right then I had to learn how to fight, and I didn't, not just with physically learn to fight, but I had to learn how to fight with my words. And I learned really quickly in the neighborhood that I lived in. We used to have a game there called Playing the Dozens, which is Eminem made it famous in 8 Mile with, battle rapping in the street came from a phrase called Playing the Dozens, where that was a phrase from slavery, where they used to sell slaves one at a time, but if there was something wrong with them, they would sell them by the dozen in a cage. And those slaves would be in a cage making fun of each other and making fun of each other's ailments. And that's where your mama jokes came from. Your mama's so this, your mama's so that. And I was at school and they made fun of me all the time for being Egyptian and being foreign and having an afro and weird clothes. And I got the best way to get good at roasting people is to be roasted a lot. So they roasted me for the first few years, and I came back from summer. Instead of being physically taller, I became verbally taller. I got a lot of new words. I understood the English language better, and I found my funny bone. And I started making fun of the guy that used to beat me up. And every day he beat me up, and every day I made fun of him. And finally, after the 3rd day, he goes, "Hey, man, if you stop making fun of me, I'll stop beating you up." And that's when I learned comedy is power.
Comedy is détente. Nice.
100%, dude. It was stronger.
That was awesome.
Yeah, man. It was I'm really lucky that I've got that kind of a Spider-Man-esque origin story. But it's really weird. Learning to fight with words has brought me the most peace I've ever had in my life.
Perhaps would you maybe reconsider how you look at that and say you learned how to make peace with your words, not to fight?
100%.
Maybe.
100%.
I mean, I don't know, but could be.
Yeah.
A lot of wisdom there, though, right?
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I think so. I think, you learn a lot of things from all the things that your parents don't want you to experience are things that you grow from, It's like...
you become the parent you never got.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I feel like human beings are like cacti, like the more harsh the condition, the stronger we grow. And like if you get overwatered, if you overwater a cactus and they're too entitled, they actually become soft and die. So it's like I appreciate those things that I think my mom regretted I experienced. I'm glad I experienced them because they made me who I am.
You ever hear that the earth is the kiln? It teaches us, right? This life that we're given, it's a kiln. We're the
100%.
clay.
Yeah, 100%.
I saw that in some cheesy film, but it resonated, right?
Yeah, I love it. I wouldn't trade a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't trade a thing. I love it.
Now, I imagine you get asked a lot about your heritage, right? Your father was Muslim, your mom was Jewish, right?
Yeah.
Now, the question I was wondering is, how many other peeps do you run into who are like you in the comedy business?
Well, in the comedy business, not that many. There's a couple. I mean, there's definitely Jewish comics, obviously. And then
one or two, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite jokes during the pandemic. As I said, I hate this pandemic. One of the things I miss most is as an Arabic comedian. One of the things I miss most is going on stage and occupying Jewish territory.
Oh, wow, well played, nice.
No, but I think what's funny is in America, having a Jewish mom and a Muslim dad is really unusual. But in places like the south of France or Morocco, North Africa, there's actually quite a few. Not quite
Edinburgh
a few.
Fringe.
Edinburgh Fringe is I perform there, yeah, but like in
really super impressed by that, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man.
I mean, having gone to school in England, Edinburgh wasn't that far away, right? We were in Holland Park in London, right?
Wow.
And so we heard about these things, these wonderful cultural events, right? I had to relearn how to be an American coming back here.
Hell yeah. Yeah, me too.
Strange and oh yeah, how cool. Oh wow.
Yeah.
So another question, listening to your wonderful, richly endowed podcast, They Tried to Bury Us, right? I really enjoy that. I fully advocate anybody who's looking for a little acculturation, a little touch of something different, and that will help them maybe understand themselves better. I would encourage them to take a listen. But
thanks,
after listening,
man, that's so nice.
Of course, yeah. I great respect for that. Really, really wonderfully done. And I can't wait to see more of it, listen to more of it. But I'm curious to know more about how everyday life as an immigrant, fuels your creative process.
Well, I mean, I think more and more, the older I get, the more I realize how smart John Lennon was when he wrote that song, Imagine. Like I it's funny because I'm Egyptian and Greek, but my whole life, even in Egypt, they told me I don't look Egyptian. And I ended up looking, but I do a lot of Greek people from this island my grandmother's from called Crete go, you look like you're from Crete. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, this is really bizarre. And then one of my friends goes, no, listen, you're Mediterranean. And I'm like, what's that? And he goes, that's people that were born around the Mediterranean, whether that's French or Southern French, Italian, Greek, people from Alexandria in Egypt. You guys are Mediterranean. He goes, now, no, there wasn't a war that drew that line, but geography made you look that way. He's all these lines are fake. And I would even say race is fake. So it's like we're all the same, and I think the difficulty I had having a Muslim dad and a Jewish mom was actually a gift because it made me start looking at things differently and looking at people differently. And I don't even look at myself as a minority so much. I mean, there's your given family is the family you're born with, and then there's your chosen family, the friends that you pick. And a lot of times, the friends that you pick are more meaningful because you've made that decision consciously.
Well, that's why mutts are more resilient.
100%. 100%. We are all the same. I'm very proud of being American. I'm very proud of being Egyptian, but I recognize now more than ever that there's a big difference between Americans and America. And there's a big difference between Egyptians and the Egyptian government. Governments are not a people. And the only us and them to me is us versus the people in power. It's never been us and them versus Muslims versus Jews, or brown people versus white people, or black people versus Asian people. None of that. We're all the same. It's the people in power. That is the most intoxicating chemical substance that we need to fight against, is people that are drunk on power, regardless of color, race, creed. Those are the people.
The trap filters down our way. The trap rolls downhill, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right. We're brothers and sisters. Anybody, I don't even care. I don't care what color someone's skin is, or I don't even care who they voted for. If they're my neighbor, they're my neighbor. You know,
I just care that they vote. You have a vote, use it.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. And that also defines us as Americans. I believe, in my personal opinion, that people that choose to stay out of the vote are casting aside their ability to exercise any discussion point, to tender any of their opinions in any of these arguments.
Yeah.
If they abandon their vote, they don't have a right to say shit, honestly.
Yeah. I told this to one of my friends.
Yeah.
No, I don't think, I think it's just people don't think about it enough because we're so busy in our day to day. I mean, as Americans, we only get 2 weeks vacation. Places like France, they get 14 to 16 weeks. We're so competitive here because we all have this lottery mentality where we think we're one break away from being a millionaire. And so we never take a day off. We are overworked. We are undertaken care of. We are underrepresented. And then you have, places like France where they cut off their king's head and their government is afraid of them, but we're afraid of our government. And that's not the way it should be. Our government should be afraid of us.
That's powerful. Next question I have for you, Tamer. Is it Tamer or Tamer? Which you prefer?
Tamer. It's like a hammer with a T. That's the way I remind people to pronounce it. Yeah.
Would you say that you're obviously great respect for people, the immigrant experience, and particularly of women, has bred a unique humor all its own in you? And if so, how?
Oh, it's an interesting question. Yeah, it's really funny, man. Like when I was a kid, my mom was my hero, and so was my grandmother. So I grew up in this house where women were my heroes at a time in the 80s where I'd fallen in love with punk rock music, and there were a whole lot of female lead singers in punk bands. So I don't know if I would classify myself as a feminist, but I grew up where it wasn't words that changed my mind. It was actions. It was experiences. Seeing Blondie and the Runaways and Pat Benatar and Joan Jett, Bikini Kill, all these awesome punk bands where they were like sexy and strong at the same time. And so I've always had a respect for women because my dad kind of failed to connect with me. So I primed with women. So, I mean, again, it's another example where it's something that should be something sad that turned into a strength. And I think over time, it's given me a perspective where, I say things that sound feminist, but I don't look like the stereotypical feminist guy. I think like I have some younger fans that are like, thank you for saying the stuff, but also being a boxer and looking like a man's man, quote unquote, whatever that means. But I think sometimes when you're young and full of testosterone and the only people that you hear that are feminists or look like feminists are guys who look like physically weaker people, it turns you off to the notion of being a feminist. It turns you off to the notion of being empathetic to other people and minorities and women. So I think it's molded me in that way where I can talk about, I'm a surprising thing, which I think a big part of comedy is being surprising. I think I look one way, but I say things that are another way. And I think that's important in comedy, is to not be predictable.
Right. Yeah, you also mentioned in that wonderful podcast, they tried to bury us, that your definition of humor is a very potent and revealing art form. That really touched base with me, Tamer, because I feel so much very the same way. Could you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Ask me the question again.
Well, you mentioned how you came to understand comedy as a strength. And how has that become such a revealing art form for you as a performer?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. There's this tribal quote I really like, and it said, "Knowledge is only a rumor until it lives in the muscle." And it made me realize that there are things like comedy, things like boxing, where if you're thinking, you're already punched in the face. It's your body that has to learn it. You know what I mean? And it's the repetition of boxing, the repetition, and your body learns things from an audience. If you say something and the audience reacts negatively, it's like being electrocuted. It's like Pavlov's dog. You know what I mean? Where you learn and you find your sense of humor through exposure to the audience. So you're saying, how did I find my? Ask me the question one more time.
Well, yeah, of course, absolutely. Sorry if I wasn't clear. In your podcast, you were talking with the Irish friend of yours.
Yeah,
I think it was episode 2, season 2.
Yeah.
She works out of LA. She's a good friend of yours, and you were talking about, when you're on stage, you find that sometimes comedy is truly so revealing.
Yes. Okay, so this is the point I wanted to say. So imagine being on stage, right? And it's really funny because sometimes people will tell you something, but you just don't get it until you feel it in your body. You know what I mean? Like someone can give you Kelly Slater can write down exactly how to catch a wave on a surfboard, but you're not going to be able to do it until you get in that ocean and get pounded. And then you get positive feedback and negative feedback. When I've been on stage and I've told jokes for the sake of being funny, I got just an okay response, or sometimes no response at all. But when I was on stage and I was emotionally naked and I was extremely honest, even saying things that made me scared to say, that made me think that people were going to pass judgment on me, or made me think that people were going to think that I was less of a man, the reward was great. When I talked about my dad beating me up and I was ashamed of that, instead of people laughing at me or judging me, I had people coming up to me going, "Oh my God, thank you for saying those things." So it taught me from being on stage that being honest was the real way to connect with other human beings. And imagine how powerful that is for an only child who was beaten at home and beaten at school and was incredibly lonely on the walk in between those two places. And then you find this art form where you learn that if you're 100% yourself, if you're 100% honest, even the people that look like the people that used to beat you up will want to run up to you and give you a hug. It's insane.
Sounds to me, if I hear you correctly, that you're saying comedy is really the shortest distance between your head and your heart.
Yeah, I think so.
Could be. I mean,
Yeah,
I know
think
that's
so.
a little fluffy, but it sounds like a clear map to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, Hunter S. Thompson used to say this really great thing where he said, "I don't believe the truth is ever told between the hours of 9 and 5. And comedy, if you use comedy language that sounds anything like language during 9 to 5, you're not connecting with people on a real level. It's just too shallow. Comedy is after 5 o'clock language. You should say the things that would get you in trouble with an HR department, because as a comic, you don't have one. You can say the things that people wish they could say. And it's almost a duty and an obligation to, because we're a little bit more free than most people. It's like if regular
Especially
people
for a good student like you.
Oh, thanks.
I mean,
buddy.
I don't mean to
appreciate
be
that.
disrespectful. It just seems like your comedy experience has taught you so much.
It has, man. It's saved my life. I mean, this pandemic more than anything has made me realize that I don't do comedy for money, and I don't do it for status, and I don't do it for friends and likes. I've chased all those things. I'm not going to pretend that I'm better than anybody else. I chased those things. I've been upset by those things. I've wanted more fans. I've wanted more likes and all that stuff, but it's not the reason I do it. And doing Zoom shows during a pandemic, one of my comedy friends was like, "This isn't a real audience." And I'm like, "Yeah." And when Tom Hanks was stuck on that island and he drew a face on that volleyball and called it Wilson, that wasn't a real person, but it's what we needed. Because he needs people in his life, and I need comedy in my life because I found my purpose. I was lucky enough to find my purpose, and it was to make people laugh, and to tell people that it's okay to be honest and it's okay to be yourself. I think it's incredibly valuable to do that in the face of a time like this when people are being told to be less free in a way.
How are you feeling on that score during the pandemic? Freer, less free, restricted,
Hopeful.
careful?
Hopeful.
Hopeful.
I'm feeling extremely hopeful. I have friends and good friends who were police officers. I know good people who are police officers, but I also have scars on my face from being hit in the face by a cop with a billy club. And my dad was an immigrant and didn't know better. When I came home, my dad was like, "We're not pressing charges. What did you do to make him do that?" My dad left Egypt, but Egypt didn't leave my dad. He was a man that came from a police state that disciplined him into submission. And when his own son got beat by a cop when I was only 14 years old, my dad didn't say anything and didn't do anything. And I think that police officers need to learn. Of course, not all cops are bad, but I had a cop friend tell me that. He goes, "Why are you writing these posts? Not all cops are bad." I go, "I know not all cops are bad. And you should know that not all black people are criminals. Not all Arabs are terrorists. Not all Mexicans are illegal. And we are a mirror reflection, treating you the way you've been treating us. That doesn't mean it's right. That means that you have to remember that you are us and we are you. You are not here to terrorize and intimidate. You are here to protect and serve. You are not the police. We are the police. It's the people that are the police. You've been poking us with a stick for years, and people have finally had enough. And I don't think it's such a bad thing that the police and the government learns that the people are bigger than they are and they're scarier than they are. And having these militarized cops and these armored weapons, armored and weaponized vehicles and all that shit, that's not America. That's not the way it's supposed to be. So I think we're headed in a good direction. It's a bad thing that's happened. It's a bad thing that's happening. But I think if anything, maybe it'll get people to start listening.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I do, Tamer. I do. So let's switch gears for a second. Sure. What's it been like transitioning back and forth from stage to Netflix, Amazon, True TV, and places like Hulu?
Yeah, man, I'm just enjoying it along the way. I think one of the most dangerous things when you're trying to achieve any goal, especially a goal in something like the entertainment industry, is to get so caught up on the next thing that you don't appreciate the thing that you're doing. And I appreciate everything. I'll be on, a TV show, and I'll win Comedy Knockout on True TV, which is so validating. And the very next day, I'll have someone ask me if I want to perform at a mic in a basement, to 20 people, and I couldn't be more excited to do it. And that's the one thing it taught me is as great as TV is, it's not like the old days of comedy where all you need to do is be on Johnny Carson once and all of a sudden you're famous. It's not like that anymore. And I'm glad it's not like that anymore. I'm glad. I don't want to change. This is what I want to do as a purpose. The art of comedy to me is more important than the business of comedy. So I'm never going to let Netflix or networks or a TV show be bigger than being on stage with a live audience and connecting with people one-on-one.
Awesome. Ooh, here's a good one. How do the demands of each of those mediums compare? So you're on the stage for a run, say you're at the Edinburgh Fringe, and then you're back here doing a television show. How do those two compare?
Man, the bigger it gets, less real it feels, I think there's a really great thing that I learned in psychology. They said comedy is communal. Live comedy in particular is communal. And in this psychology article I read about laughter, they said you're 30 times more likely to laugh out loud in a group than you are to laugh alone. So no matter what comic you put on a screen, on a Netflix screen, it's not the same as watching live comedy and having a comic right in front of you perform and bouncing and reacting off the audience and the energy in the room. There's a real thing to the energy in the room. And people say, why are some comics controversial? Why do they say things that upset people? And it's like where laughter comes from is it's tension first and then release. And they don't know where laughter comes from, but they have a couple anecdotal thoughts. They said that back in the day, we were under a tremendous amount of stress totally afraid that anytime we go out inside, we could get killed by a saber-toothed tiger or a dinosaur, some alpha predator. And so when we were cave people, we were under tremendous stress all the time. And then there was all these cave people sitting around a fire, and they heard a rustling in the bush, and they all tensed up, and then a rabbit jumped out, and then they laughed. And that's where laughter comes from. It's from tension and release. It's from almost fear and danger and then release. And TV edits danger out. Networks edit danger out. Social media sometimes edits danger out, edits tension out. But live performances do not. Live church. Like church, well, I don't know about church, because they've got a book and guidelines that they follow. But when it comes to like being on stage, when no one's on their phone and no one's got their camera on, but people are all present and we're talking about the things that we're feeling in a very raw way, in a very emotional way, in a very naked way, I don't think there's anything more real than that and anything that connects us together more than that.
Oh, I couldn't agree more about the being real part. The reason I say it was like church is my parents were preachers, right? In the truest sense of the word. Oratory was their gift. I mean, they were over there teaching Africans who didn't even speak English, basically how to be a priest within their own culture. My parents weren't proselytizers. They weren't thumping Bibles on people's necks or anything like that. But for me, because Africa was such an open air sort of place, sort of culture, made me appreciate what you just said about the true impact of a real performance versus an edited, televised performance.
Okay, I'm with you. I get that.
See,
I get that.
Yeah, it was really awesome because when we went to church, it was like and I was in a school that was predominantly international but European. And then we often did these weeks where we would go and do services or join services with the African community. And we would all walk to the church singing right together. I know it sounds corny, but we're in Africa. We're all
sounds
singing
beautiful.
Together, right? Yeah. It was truly made me appreciate color blindness from day one. I mean, being from New York, that helps as well. But learning life that way, it taught me the value of good communication.
Absolutely.
Which in turn also makes me love good comics like yourself.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate
it. It makes me happy. I love to laugh. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
both that tears and humor. They teach you.
Dude, there's nothing that terrorizes a dictator more than people getting along. Nothing more. Nothing terrorizes them more. Their number one goal, anybody who's a corrupt leader or a dictator or someone who wants to take something from you, the thing that terrifies them more than anything is when we lock arms together. Whether it's singing songs together, praying together, laughing together, when we realize that the only us and them is us versus these guys trying to use us as human resources, as bullets in their guns, that scares them. The thing that makes us feel good is the thing that gives them fear.
Interesting perspective.
It's beautiful that you say that. I think that's a really kind thing that your folks did, and a really wonderful thing. That's a very human thing that you connected.
Yeah, we traveled a bit. We got to see quite a bit of this planet, and
that's awesome.
It was definitely informative. Very much so.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a very weird question for you. How would you like to be remembered, Tamer, as a comedian?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a great question. I think I'd like to be remembered for maybe like the way John Lennon was. I am a peaceful person. I do want peace. I'm of a person that's of the people. I don't want fame. I just want people to say, hey, that guy genuinely cared about people, genuinely loved people, and really tried his best to be a good person. I think that's it right there.
Tamer Kattan, the John Lennon of comedy.
I wish.
Hey, don't wish. Make it happen.
Thanks, man.
They'll forget about John Lennon. They'll be like, hey, man, here's comedian the peacemaker.
Right on. I love it.
Finally, let's wrap it up with this question. With such continuing international success in your reach and a growing appreciative audience here at home in the U.S., Tamer, what's next for you?
Dude, I think we have to navigate what the future looks like. And I'm excited about it. Like my grandfather used to say this really cool thing that I like. I think he stole it from Mark Twain, where he said, history may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And basically what he meant by that is people are predictable. And he said, if you look at the Farmer's Almanac, it doesn't predict the weather, but it gives you a history of what it was. So if you look at March in 2021, and you could look at the history book and what happened in March of every year before and kind of triangulate what it's going to be like. So have we had a pandemic before? Yes, we have. Was it terrible? Yes, it was. But how did people respond after? It was the roaring 20s. It was an appreciation for life. It was a celebration of life. So I'm excited about the future. I'm excited to see where comedy goes. I don't care about the comedy business. I care about the art. So whether the stage goes from a comedy club to a drive-in theater doesn't matter to me, as long as I can make people laugh. I don't care about managers or agents or TV networks or any of that shit. I just care about other people. And so I'm excited about where the future is going to go. I think it's going to be more pure.
Excellent. Pure sounds good.
Right on.
I mean, as far as I know, some of the friends of cannabis I know would agree with that statement.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, cannabis has been a huge savior for me during this process. And it's a lot of people are like, cannabis makes you creative. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. Being relaxed makes you creative. Cannabis helps me relax, and it helps me find my own voice, and it helps me listen. It opens up my ears and opens up my eyes, and all creative ideas are associative. The stuff you put in influences the stuff you put out. So I'm glad that cannabis helps me put nice things in and peaceful things in. And it helps me put out, hopefully help keep putting out great content and stuff that makes people laugh, but also makes them feel.
Tamer, that's something that I didn't expect, that you just thought just blew right out of my left ear. Comedy, and it just left. Comedy, in addition to being such a good teacher, I mean, think about that, how it really brings people together.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember what it was. You just said to me, what I heard is that comedy is a great innovator.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that, because every time you appreciate a nuance in human behavior, and you've got this vast audience in front of you in a stand-up situation, and think of 80% of human communication is nonverbal. So you got hundreds of people out there non-verbally responding to you.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons it feels so big, so heady, I would imagine.
Sure.
But wow, do you believe that comedy is a great innovator?
Oh, I think it's our job. Like Hemingway used to say, as a writer, it's your job to notice what others only see. So that's why so many great comics, when they say something, people in the audience are like, oh my God, that's so true. So it's because people are so busy in their regular 9-to-5 jobs and their regular responsibilities, and not, people are so busy and so overwhelmed by the pressure of daily life that they don't have the freedom that artists have. Everybody always thinks an artist's life is hard, but we have more freedom. And with that freedom, it's our job to investigate the things that maybe the average person might miss because they're busier than we are, or they're more burdened than we are. So I want to use my freedom in a positive way to ring the siren and say, hey, this is wrong, or hey, this is right, or hey, this is funny. Whether it's, hey, everybody, this is more beautiful than you think it is, and we should pay more attention to it, or hey, everybody, this is more scary, then we're giving it, then we're ignoring this thing that we shouldn't be ignoring, or we're not taking full appreciation of this thing that we should be appreciating. So I think for that reason, comedy sharpens your eyes and your ears, your sense of appreciation, all those sorts of things. I think it's our job to notice what others only see.
Excellent. Well, maybe that's why I like comedy so much. I love to laugh. I can't
love it,
lie.
man. Right
that's
on.
for sure. Really.
It's a defiant act. It's an act of defiance to laugh. It's great. It's punk rock.
To challenge others to see what you see as funny. And I would bet you feel like you got away with something sometimes up there. Do
absolutely.
you?
100%. It's like a magic trick, bro.
Yeah.
It's like a magic trick. I had a guy come up to me. He's like, man, I'll tell you what. I don't agree with everything you said, but that shit was funny. And I was like, dude, that is the biggest compliment in the world. He had a T-shirt on that said, "The day they outlaw guns is the day I become an outlaw." And I made a joke about gun control, and he said, "I don't agree with you, but that shit was funny, and it made me think of things differently." And
what would you put on a T-shirt?
What would I put on a T-shirt? Probably what I said earlier. The only us and them is us versus the people in power.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to see it. I want to see
right
it.
On, right on. Maybe I'll make it happen one day.
Everyone here in Salt Lake City really wants to know, when are you going to come out to Salt Lake?
Hey man, that's on my short list for sure. I'm going to make it happen soon. If not by the end of this year, the beginning of next. I love Utah. I've been wanting to come out there for a long time. I've been through Utah a few times. I have a lot of good friends out there. I've snowboarded there. I've got all kinds of friends there. So I'm definitely coming out soon. If not the end of this year, the beginning of next, for sure.
Thank you so much for spending time with Salt Lake City today.
Thanks for having me, bro. It was a great chat.